And now 20 years later, I need to know what happened. In this series, I'm trying to answer those questions, and I gotta tell you, I hear some incredible stories along the way. But know this, could have been me, could have been you. You're listening to the first of a 10-episode series that does a deep dive into the story of Heaven's Gate. And I am so proud. And I hope you subscribe to hear the entire series on Stitcher or wherever you get your podcasts. Creating this project felt personal to me for a lot of reasons. Because, as I've alluded, I grew up in a religious cult that was not too terribly different from Heaven's Gate. And I recently sat down with Jenna Weiss Berman from Pineapple Street Media to talk about how my background in the Worldwide Church of God impacted our exploration into Heaven's Gate.
All right, Glenn.
Yes.
I'm psyched to talk to you.
I'm excited to talk back.
Awesome. A big part of why we wanted to have you host this show and why we're so excited you're doing it is because you sort of had similar experiences growing up to Heaven's Gate. Maybe not exactly the same. Do you know how your parents first found out about the group?
Yes, the founder, Herbert W. Armstrong, he was multimedia before multimedia was cool. He had a radio show, TV show, a magazine. I believe my mother started listening to him on the radio, and from there kind of brought my father along.
So did your parents cut off their whole family except their kids basically when they joined?
At times, yeah. And you know, terrible things. Like I remember my grandparents trying to send us like Easter baskets or Christmas presents, which were forbidden according to our religion, and they would throw them in the garbage. And we wouldn't have contact with them, sometimes for years at a time. And sometimes it would loosen up a bit, but then it would get tight again. I still deeply regret some of those walls that were put up because I didn't grow up with my other cousins the way they grew up together. We were very much apart.
Yeah. And how long did your parents stay in the group?
Until my late teens. Then the group essentially imploded.
What happened?
The founder died.
Oh.
Yeah, so again, a very common story.
Familiar story.
Yeah. This whole story with Heaven's Gate has made me really consider, like, if he had given us something to drink so we could go meet Jesus, I'm guessing that between 70 and 90% of the people would have drank it. And that's a scary, scary, scary thought. And another reason why I really appreciate this sort of look back, it's like, what if it seems like anything could have gone wrong and we might have been in a mansion in San Diego? Because there was this sort of slavish belief in Herbert W. Armstrong that he spoke for God. He was an emissary of God. Heaven's Gate touched thousands of people, and only a few went in and did the ultimate act. And that's what they're remembered for. Not the rest of the people, but the people who went the whole way. And so it's not surprising to me that there's going to be a zealot aspect to any group of any type.
Can you tell me a little bit about how the idea of the apocalypse or the second coming or whatever you want to call it affected your worldview when you were a kid?
You know, there are several recordings of Herbert W. Armstrong preaching, and I was surprised by one recently, and all of a sudden I hear that voice from the past, and I felt like a kid in those folding chairs in that rented hall, and I felt that tension, that fear that you think the end is almost here. That is an interesting sort of condition as a little kid to have. You know, little kids are active. I was generally a cheerful boy, left to my own devices, but there was also that darkness because we did think the end was nigh. No joke. I know it sounds crazy, but we thought we didn't have much longer on this earth.
How long were you a member of this cult?
I was a true believer. I had some issues on the edges, but I thought that generally this was the truth until my late teens.
Wow.
I was a believer. I wasn't someone on the outside looking in, which to me right now is just stunning that I would cede so much of myself and my personhood to an organization. I can only shake my head now when I look back, because it really was encompassing and who you were allowed to speak to, especially as a young person, particularly who you were allowed to date.
Who were you allowed to speak to and date?
In my case, no one, because there's a very strict racial segregation aspect in that blacks and whites were not to be mixed and such, which was all well and good because I certainly loved the sisters, but in my area, there weren't any.
Were you the only black family?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
And on the Grand Rapids, Michigan area, for a long time, we were the only black family. And then there was one or two more. Unfortunately, they had sons as well, so it wasn't.
So there was literally no one you could date.
We had to go far and wide. This is what's terrible. There was I lived in Grand Rapids, and an hour and a half away, there was a black girl, right, in the church. I was like, oh, Lord. And everyone would be like, there's one for you. There's one for you. I mean,
one option.
There's one for you, yeah. Wow. Her father, I believe, was white. And so and it's terrible for her too. You know, she's in the middle of this whole vast sea. She can't do anything, but she flipped the script. She got sent a letter to headquarters in Pasadena, California, where you could get a review of your racial classification, and you could get a reassignment, which she did. She took a lot of flash in it, took a picture, sent it in, and all of a sudden, the only black girl for 150 miles got a letter saying that she was, for all intents and purposes, now with responsibilities, white.
Oh my God.
Yep.
Wow. So would you say it was a white supremacist vibe?
There's a lot of white supremacist elements of it. Yes, absolutely. There's something called the curse of Ham. Noah had 3 sons in the Bible: Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And according to this theology, Shem was the progenitor of the white races, Ham was the progenitor of the black races, and Japheth of the Asian, because there's only 3, there's only 3
only
races.
3 races, yeah.
And so, but Ham was cursed, and his curse was apparently his skin color.
Wow.
Now, they don't say any of this in the Bible about him being cursed with black skin, but that's an old theology, and it wasn't invented by our organization. It comes from slavery days, but it was very heavily adopted and believed by a lot of people.
So what do you think drew your parents, your black parents, to a kind of white supremacist?
I don't know. I do not understand what black folks were doing. And it wasn't just my parents, actually. There were other black families in this organization. At some point, there was actually a segregated, all black services somewhere. In a lot of ways, that mirrored America.
Yeah.
Just like with Heaven's Gate, they were very interested in UFOs at the time when America was interested in UFOs. I don't think that in the racial aspect of my organization largely mirrored kind of the racial attitudes of the time. And I was living in a very rural area as well. Yeah, it was wild.
Did you ever convert anyone?
No, I'll tell you why. I was a true believer, but I kind of had some limits to even what I was willing to do. What they would do is, if you were a full baptized member, one of your privileges was you got to participate in a Passover ceremony where you would wash each other's feet. And I couldn't bear to go to a room and start washing people's feet.
You're not into it?
So I was putting this off as long as I could, my full membership privileges. So before I never became a fully baptized member, even though all my friends, I think at the time, were full, but I never went into that basement and I never washed anybody's nasty feet.
Oh, wow.
Don't blame you.
Wow.
And what is your spiritual life like now?
My spiritual life is, let's just call it open. This might sound self-serving, but I think that what I love so much about story and hearing other people's story and telling my own is that it's the closest thing that we have to magic. And it's the best way that I know to connect to someone else's divine is by hearing their story. It's like telepathy and everything getting in their head. When you hear a story and you feel like you've had someone else's experience, I think that you're sensing some aspect of the divine. And I can't go beyond that through some sort of spiritual interpretation. But if I have a religion, it's based on that and that empathy of narrative. I want to find me. I want to find an alternate me. I want to see, because my own background has been so touched by really religious charlatans, religious malpracticers, malfeasers. And I'm so, in a way, grateful to have found my way eventually out of that. And I know that it was probably the difference between finding my way out and finding my way trapped is just a gossamer thread. It's a slight wind. It's a butterfly's wing beat from being in a situation where I know I was trapped in a situation where I feel more free. And so for me, this whole journey is an unwinding where I can go back and see, okay, what if I had turned right instead of left? Could I have been in an organization like this, and how would I have responded? What's interesting is that I don't have this sense of these people being as much an other as our community at large does, because I know I have it on very, very good authority because of my background that I'm not another. I did grow up in an organization that was apocalyptic. And thank goodness that we didn't have to put on tracksuits. Thank goodness that's not how we went out. But I could see it happening. And so I want to kind of revisit every single aspect of this that is something that I'm really intimately interested in. And see the other Glenn.